The soft hum of the engine was the only sound breaking the silence of that cold October night. Lisa drove her dark blue Chevrolet Chevette along an empty road, her red, swollen eyes fixed on the path ahead as silent tears streamed down her face. In the back seat, Emma and Ethan, her 12-year-old twins, slept peacefully, unaware of the fate their mother had chosen for them. The car moved slowly along a winding back road that snaked between hills covered in dense vegetation. Lisa glanced in the rearview mirror at her children's sleeping faces, so alike yet so different. Emma, with her wavy brown hair and faint freckles, had always been the determined, practical one. Ethan, a few minutes younger, had the same brown hair but straight and a gentler, dreamier nature. Lisa's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she fought against the storm of emotions consuming her. The depression that had plagued her for months had grown into an uncontrollable monster, convincing her that her children would be better off without her. Bills were piling up, rent was overdue, and the little money she made as a waitress barely covered food. The car came to a stop in a remote spot, surrounded by tall trees and uneven terrain. Lisa turned off the engine and sat in silence for a few minutes, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. With trembling hands, she grabbed a bag from the passenger seat and carefully placed it beside her twins. A few bottles of water, packs of crackers, an old blanket, and a small amount of cash, all she could manage to gather. "Forgive me," she whispered, gently kissing each of her children on the forehead. "You deserve more than I can give." Lisa left a note on the dashboard: "Find help when you wake up. Follow the main road. Forgive me. I love you." With one last agonizing look at her children, she stepped out of the car, quietly shut the door, and began walking down the dark road, her tears now falling freely. Dawn brought with it a cold mist and the cruel reality of abandonment. Emma was the first to wake, her mind still foggy from sleep. The first thing she noticed was the silence. No engine hum, no warmth from the car's heater. Just the heavy quiet of morning and the cold air seeping through the window cracks. "Ethan," she called, gently shaking her brother. "Wake up." Ethan opened his eyes slowly, blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. "Where are we? Where's Mom?" Emma had already found the note and held it with trembling hands. Her voice faltered as she read the words aloud to her brother, who stared back at her with wide eyes filled with fear and disbelief. "She can't have done this," Ethan murmured, his voice cracking. "She's coming back, isn't she?" Emma swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to stay composed. "I don't know, Ethan. But we need to figure out what to do now." The twins stepped out of the car to assess their situation. They were on a hill surrounded by dense vegetation. The dirt road they had traveled on wound its way down the mountain, disappearing into the trees. The morning air was sharp, and the mist made it difficult to see more than a few dozen feet ahead. "We have to try to find help," Emma said, ever practical. She began taking stock of the supplies their mother had left behind. "At least we have water and some food." Ethan stayed silent, his tears falling quietly as he stared at the unfamiliar landscape. The reality of their abandonment was beginning to sink in, bringing with it a pain that felt almost physical. "Why did she do this to us?" he finally asked, his voice small and broken. Emma paused what she was doing and pulled her brother into a tight hug. "I don't know, Ethan. But we'll be okay. I promise I'll take care of you." At that moment, they heard a strange noise coming from the nearby vegetation. The twins cautiously approached the source of the sound, their eyes widening at what they saw: an elderly man lying among the plants, seemingly injured. "Help?" he murmured weakly upon seeing the twins. "Please?" Emma and Ethan exchanged glances, momentarily forgetting their own predicament. Despite the fear and confusion swirling inside them, they knew they couldn't ignore someone in need. "Let's help him," Emma said, already moving toward the man. Ethan grabbed the water from the car. The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, had taken a fall during his morning hike and badly injured his ankle. He was a local resident who knew the area well and, more importantly, had a cell phone with him, though its battery was nearly dead. "You've saved my life," he said after Emma helped him sit up and Ethan brought the water. "I could have been stuck here for hours, but what are two kids doing out here all alone?" The twins exchanged glances again, and Emma felt the tears she had been holding back start to spill. In a shaky voice, she explained their situation to Mr. Harrison, whose face became a mask of concern and compassion. "My God," he murmured, pulling out his phone. "We're going to take care of this right now." With the last bit of battery power, Mr. Harrison managed to make a call for help. Within the hour, a rescue team arrived at the scene, providing medical assistance for the elderly man and aid for the abandoned twins. As they were taken to the nearest town in an ambulance, Emma held Ethan's hand tightly. Their mother's abandonment had left a deep wound in their hearts, but their act of kindness in helping Mr. Harrison had unexpectedly opened a new chapter in their lives, one they couldn't yet imagine. Mr. Harrison watched them from across the ambulance, a faint smile on his weary face. There was something in his eyes that suggested he had plans to help these brave children who, even in the midst of their own tragedy, didn't hesitate to aid a stranger in need. The town hospital was a modest 3-story building, its pastel-colored walls attempting, unsuccessfully, to convey a sense of warmth. Emma and Ethan sat in a small waiting room in the pediatric ward while social workers and doctors discussed their case in a nearby office. The air smelled of hospital disinfectant, mingling with the aroma of coffee drifting from a machine in the hallway. "Do you think they'll separate us?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling slightly as he held his sister's hand. The fear of being torn apart was even more terrifying than the abandonment they had already endured. Emma squeezed his hand tighter. "I won't let that happen," she said with a determination far beyond her 12 years. "I promise." Across the hallway through the slightly ajar door of a room, they could see Mr. Harrison talking animatedly on the phone. Despite his bandaged ankle and being under medical observation, the elderly man hadn't wasted a moment making calls, his deep voice occasionally reaching the twins' ears. Margaret Chin, the social worker assigned to their case, approached the twins with a warm smile. She was a middle-aged woman, her gray-streaked hair tied in a loose bun and kind eyes peering out from behind thin-framed glasses. "Emma, Ethan," she began, taking a seat in a nearby chair. "We need to talk about what happens next. Usually in situations like yours we try to find close relatives first. Do you have any family members we can contact?" The twins exchanged glances before Emma replied, "We don't know anyone in our family. Mom never talked about them." Margaret jotted down a few notes on her clipboard, her face maintaining a professional calm, though her eyes betrayed deep concern. "Well, in that case—" "Excuse me," Mr. Harrison's voice interrupted. He was limping slightly as he approached, leaning on a temporary cane. "Sorry to intrude, but I think I can help." Mr. Harrison explained that he owned a small inn in town and had both the space and resources to take the twins in temporarily. "Besides," he added, "these kids saved my life today. I feel it's my duty to repay them in any way I can." Margaret looked skeptical. "Mr. Harrison, while your offer is generous, there are legal procedures we must follow. We can't simply—" "Of course," he interrupted gently. "That's why I've already contacted my attorney. He's on his way with all the necessary documentation to begin the process for temporary custody. I've also secured letters of recommendation from the local judge and police chief, who can vouch for my character." Emma's eyes widened at how quickly and efficiently Mr. Harrison had acted. There was something deeply reassuring about his calm and determined presence, like a beacon of stability in the chaos their lives had become. The following hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, interviews, and evaluations. Mr. Harrison's attorney, a man named Robert Mitchell, arrived with a folder full of documents and a well-structured plan for the twins' temporary custody. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emma and Ethan found themselves in the back seat of Mr. Harrison's car, watching the small town scenery blur past the windows. The inn, which they learned was called Serene Valley, was located on the outskirts of town, nestled in a quiet area surrounded by trees. "This is where you'll be staying," Mr. Harrison announced as he parked in front of a 2-story Victorian house painted in soft shades of blue and white. The house had a wide porch that wrapped around the entire first floor, with rocking chairs strategically placed to take in the view of the valley. Martha, the inn's housekeeper, was waiting for them at the entrance. She was a sturdy woman with white hair and a warm smile that instantly made the twins feel a little more at ease. "Welcome, dears," she said, guiding them inside. "I've prepared adjacent rooms for you on the second floor with a connecting door. I thought you'd like to stay close." The inn's interior was cozy, with dark wooden furniture and soft rugs spread across the floors. The smell of freshly baked apple pie filled the air, making Ethan's stomach growl audibly. "I think someone's hungry," Martha chuckled. "Come on, let's have something to eat while your rooms get the final touches." During dinner in the inn's cozy kitchen, Mr. Harrison explained more about what the future would hold. "You can stay here for as long as you need," he said. "I've already spoken with the local school and they're ready to welcome you on Monday. Martha will help you with uniforms and school supplies." Emma, who had barely touched her pie, looked at Mr. Harrison with teary eyes. "Why are you doing all this for us?" Mr. Harrison paused for a moment, his face taking on a thoughtful expression. "You know, sometimes life puts us in difficult situations to show us a different path. You helped me when I needed it, without hesitation, even when you were in a terrible situation yourselves. Now it's my turn to help. Later, in their new rooms, Emma and Ethan tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Their rooms were spacious and comfortable, with large windows overlooking the valley and soft beds covered in warm quilts. "Emma?" Ethan called through the open connecting door between their rooms. "Are you awake?" "Yeah," she replied, sitting on her bed and hugging her knees. "Do you think Mom's okay?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds before Emma replied, "I hope so, Ethan. I hope she finds the help she needs." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sound of the wind in the trees outside. Despite the comfort of their new rooms and the kindness of their hosts, both of them knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The trauma of abandonment wouldn't be easily overcome, and the questions about their mother would continue to haunt them. However, there was something in the atmosphere of the Serene Valley Inn, in Mr. Harrison's kindness and Martha's affection, that offered a glimpse of hope. It was as though fate, in its mysterious wisdom, had guided them there for a reason they couldn't yet understand. As the night wore on and sleep finally began to overtake them, neither of the twins could imagine that their true adventure was just beginning, and that the Serene Valley Inn held secrets that would change their lives forever. The first 2 weeks at the Serene Valley Inn established a new routine for Emma and Ethan. Mornings were filled with classes at the local school, where they were slowly starting to make friends. Afternoons were spent on homework and small tasks that Martha kindly assigned them around the inn. Nothing too strenuous, just enough to keep them busy and give them a sense of purpose. On a particularly hot Saturday afternoon, while helping Martha organize one of the guest rooms on the second floor, Emma noticed something strange on the old wallpaper. A small tear near the baseboard revealed what seemed to be another layer of wallpaper beneath it, with a different pattern. "Martha," Emma called, pointing to the discovery. "I think there's another wallpaper underneath this one." Martha approached, adjusting her glasses to take a better look. "Ah yes. This inn is quite old, dear. It's been through several renovations over the years. Mr. Harrison bought the property about 5 years ago, and he's been making improvements little by little." Ethan, who had been dusting the shelves, joined them. "How old is the inn?" "Oh, at least 100 years, Martha replied, her voice taking on a storytelling tone. "It was built by a traditional family in the early 20th century. They say it was one of the most beautiful houses in the region back then." The twins' curiosity was immediately piqued. In the days that followed, they began paying more attention to the details of the old building. Emma, in particular, developed a keen interest in the history of the inn. On a rainy afternoon, while exploring the attic with Mr. Harrison's permission, who was away on business, the twins made an intriguing discovery. Hidden behind some old boxes, they found a small door, almost the size of a window, that seemed to lead to some kind of compartment. "It must be locked," Ethan said, but to his surprise, when Emma turned the old doorknob, the door creaked open. The space beyond the door was small, more like a built-in closet. Using the flashlight from the cell phone Mr. Harrison had given them for emergencies, the twins illuminated the interior. The beam of light revealed several dusty boxes and, more interestingly, an old leather briefcase. "Look at this," whispered Emma, carefully pulling out the briefcase. It was heavy and the leather was dry from age, but the clasp still worked. When they opened it, their eyes widened at the contents. Dozens of yellowed documents, old photographs, and most surprising of all, a leather-bound journal. March 26, 1922, Emma read, carefully opening the journal. "Today I finally succeeded. After years of hard work and dedication, the family fortune is secure. The vault is installed and no one will ever suspect its location. Elizabeth thinks I'm mad for taking such precautions, but with the instability of the banks, I can't risk the future of our children." The twins looked at each other, barely breathing. "A vault?" Ethan whispered. "Do you think it's still here?" Emma continued reading, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. The pages of the journal revealed more details. The author, a certain Theodore Maxwell, had built a secret vault in the house to protect the family's fortune during a period of economic instability. The journal contained veiled references to its location, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Look at these photos," Ethan said, spreading the old photographs out. They were black and white images of the house being built, including some of the interior they didn't recognize. "The house looks different in some parts." "It's because it's been renovated several times," Emma replied, recalling Martha's comment about the wallpaper. Suddenly her eyes widened. "Ethan, what if the vault is still here, hidden behind one of the walls?" The sound of footsteps downstairs made the twins freeze. Martha had gone shopping, but apparently she had already returned. Quickly they put everything back in the briefcase except for the journal, which Emma hid inside her blouse. "We can't tell anyone yet," she whispered. "We need to be sure first." That night, after Martha had gone to bed, the twins gathered in Emma's room, studying the journal under the light of their flashlights. The more they read, the more fascinated they became. Theodore Maxwell had been a meticulous man, leaving subtle clues about the location of the vault in his daily notes. "Look at this," Emma pointed to a specific entry. "He mentions that the heart of the house guards our treasures, protected by the music of time. What does that mean?" Ethan furrowed his brow, thinking. "There's an old clock in the main hall, remember? That big one, dark wood?" Emma felt her heart race. "That's true. And it's right in the center of the house." The following days became an exercise in patience and careful investigation. The twins began paying closer attention to the clock and the area around it, always being careful not to raise any suspicion. Emma made a detailed sketch of the house's floor plan, marking possible locations for the vault based on the clues in the journal. It was Ethan who noticed it first. During a particularly quiet afternoon, while pretending to read a book near the clock, he picked up something strange in the sound of the pendulum. "Emma," he whispered excitedly later. "There's something different about the sound of the clock. At certain moments, it sounds hollow, like there's an empty space behind it." The next night, after everyone had gone to bed, the twins silently descended to the hall. Lanterns in hand, they began to carefully examine the clock and the wall behind it. It was Emma who found, almost by accident, a small button disguised as an ornament on the side of the clock case. When they pressed it, they heard a soft click. The wall behind the clock had a panel that moved slightly. With hearts pounding, the twins managed to slide the panel to the side, revealing a dark opening. "I can't believe it," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling with excitement. Emma illuminated the interior with her lantern, revealing an old but well-preserved metal safe. On the door of the safe there was a disc with numbers, a combination lock. "How do we open it?" Ethan asked eagerly. Emma quickly flipped through the journal. "There must be a clue here. Wait." She stopped at a specific page. "Here. Time marks our journey from beginning to end. The numbers that matter are the ones that started it all." The twins exchanged a glance, a sudden understanding passing between them. "The date," they exclaimed together, nearly forgetting to keep their voices down. With trembling hands, Emma turned the dial, entering the date mentioned at the beginning of the journal, March 26, 22. With a soft click, the safe opened. What they found inside took their breath away. There were several small boxes containing ancient gold coins, important documents, and even more surprising, a set of seemingly valuable jewels. But before they could examine the contents further, they heard a noise coming from the stairs. Quickly they closed the safe and the panel, silently running back to their rooms. Lying in their beds, hearts still racing, the twins could hardly believe what they had discovered. "What do we do now?" Ethan whispered through the communication door. Emma was silent for a moment before replying, "We have to tell Mr. Harrison. This is his house now and he's been so good to us. It's the right thing to do." What the twins didn't know was that their discovery was about to trigger a series of events that would not only change their lives but also reveal long-buried secrets about the history of the Vale Sereno Inn and its connections to the present. The next morning, Mr. Harrison returned from his business trip. Emma and Ethan found him having coffee in the kitchen with Martha, discussing the events of the past few days at the inn. The twins exchanged nervous glances, knowing they had to share their discovery. "Mr. Harrison," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk to you in private? It's important." Mr. Harrison noticed the seriousness on the twins' faces and nodded, leading them to his office, a cozy room with bookshelves lining the walls and a large window overlooking the back garden. "We found something," Emma said, pulling the journal from inside her blouse. Carefully, she and Ethan recounted the entire story: the exploration of the attic, the discovery of the briefcase, Theodore Maxwell's journal, and finally, the safe behind the clock. Mr. Harrison's face went through several emotions as he listened: surprise, fascination, and finally, an expression the twins couldn't decipher. When they finished their account, he remained silent for a few moments, thoughtfully flipping through the journal. "You did the right thing telling me," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "In fact, there's something I need to confess to you." Mr. Harrison stood up and walked over to one of the bookshelves, pulling out a thick book that turned out to be a family album. "Theodore Maxwell," he said, opening the album, "was my grandfather." The twins were stunned. "Your grandfather?" Ethan exclaimed. "Yes," Mr. Harrison confirmed. "This inn has been in my family for generations. I grew up here, but after my parents passed away, the property was sold to pay off debts. I spent years working and saving to buy it back. When I finally succeeded 5 years ago, I was determined to restore it to its former glory, but I never knew about the safe. Emma and Ethan listened, fascinated, as Mr. Harrison showed them old family photos and pictures of the inn. My grandfather always talked about securing the family's future, but no one ever knew exactly what he meant. Everyone thought it was just the ramblings of an old man. Do you want to see the safe now? Emma asked eagerly. Mr. Harrison smiled and nodded. Together they descended to the main hall. The twins showed him how to open the secret panel, and Mr. Harrison watched in awe as Emma dialed in the combination. When the safe opened, Mr. Harrison carefully examined its contents. The gold coins were rare, some dating back to the colonial period. The documents included ancient deeds and important historical records. The jewels, as they had discovered, were family heirlooms passed down through generations. "This is extraordinary," Mr. Harrison murmured, holding one of the coins. "This treasure isn't just financially valuable, it holds immense historical value." In the days that followed, experts were called in to evaluate the contents of the safe. A local historian was particularly excited about the documents, which shed new light on the region's history. The total value of the treasure was considerable. The coins and jewels alone were worth a small fortune. As the discoverers of the treasure, Mr. Harrison announced one evening during dinner, "You are entitled to a significant share of it." Emma and Ethan exchanged glances, surprised. "But it's your family's," Emma protested. Mr. Harrison smiled kindly. "And now you're part of my family. Besides, it was you who found something that had been lost for decades. My grandfather wanted this treasure to secure the family's future, and that's exactly what it's going to do." News of the discovery quickly spread through the small town. Journalists began showing up at the inn, eager to tell the story of the orphan twins who had found a historic treasure. Vale Sereno quickly became a local attraction, with people curious to visit the place and learn about its history. Amidst all the excitement, one morning, Martha hurried into the room where the twins were having breakfast. "Children," she said, her face filled with concern, "there's someone here who wants to see you." Emma and Ethan followed Martha to the living room, where a woman was waiting nervously. When she turned, the twins froze. It was Lisa, their mother. Time seemed to stand still. Lisa looked different, thinner, with deep circles under her eyes, but her gaze was clear and alert in a way the twins didn't remember seeing before. "Emma? Ethan?" Her voice faltered, tears streaming down her face. "I saw you in the newspaper. I'm so sorry. So much." The twins remained motionless, a whirlwind of emotions passing across their faces: shock, pain, anger, confusion. Mr. Harrison, who was present, stepped forward protectively. "Perhaps we should sit down," he suggested gently. "It seems we have a lot to talk about." The tension in the room was palpable as everyone settled into their seats. Lisa explained that she had sought help after abandoning her children, voluntarily admitting herself into a clinic to treat her depression. She had been under treatment ever since, trying to recover and gather the courage to face what she had done. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice choking. "I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, that I am trying to get better, and that I have never stopped loving you." Emma and Ethan remained silent, processing their mother's words. The trauma of abandonment was still very real, the wounds still fresh. But there was also a small part of them that felt relief in knowing she was alive and seeking help. "We need time," Emma finally said, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "We can't just pretend nothing happened." Lisa nodded, understanding. "I know. I just wanted you to know that I'm here now, whenever you're ready." Mr. Harrison, who had been watching the interaction quietly, spoke softly, "Maybe we can start slow. Supervised visits, when the children feel comfortable." The suggestion hung in the air as a possibility, not to erase the past, but perhaps to build something new from the ruins of what had been destroyed. As Lisa prepared to leave, Ethan spoke for the first time. "Are you better now?" The question, simple and direct, carried the weight of all the worry and fear he had felt. Lisa looked into her son's eyes, tears silently streaming down her face. "I'm working to get better every day," she answered honestly. "For you and for myself." That night, after Lisa left, the twins gathered in Emma's room, just as they had so many times since they arrived at the inn. Mr. Harrison brought hot chocolate and sat with them, offering the silent comfort of his presence. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice small in the darkness of the room. "Whatever you want to happen," Mr. Harrison replied gently. "There's no rush. Sometimes the most valuable treasures we find aren't the ones hidden in vaults, but the second chances life gives us." Emma and Ethan reflected on these words, realizing that their adventure was far from over. The treasure they had found was just part of a bigger story, a story about loss, discovery, forgiveness, and the possibility of healing. The following weeks brought a flood of changes to Serenity Vale Inn and its residents. The discovery of the historical treasure attracted not only curious tourists but also the attention of historians and collectors from all over the country. Mr. Harrison turned one of the first-floor rooms into a small museum, where some of the less valuable pieces were displayed, telling the story of the Maxwell family and the region. However, not all the attention was welcome. On one particularly busy morning, Emma watched from the balcony as another group of reporters tried to convince Martha to let them in for an interview. "This is the third time just this week," Ethan sighed, sitting next to his sister. "Don't they ever get tired?" The sudden fame was starting to weigh heavily on the twins. Their faces had appeared in newspapers and magazines, and even on local television. At school, other students treated them differently now, some with excessive admiration, others with barely concealed envy. "Miss Emma?" "Mr. Ethan?" and shrill voice cut through the air. It was Jessica Parker, a persistent reporter who had somehow managed to bypass Martha. "Just a few questions, please. The public wants to know how it feels to be the Treasure Twins." Before they could respond, Mr. Harrison appeared on the balcony. "Miss Parker," his voice was firm but polite, "I believe we've made our policy on unauthorized interviews clear. Please respect the children's privacy." But Jessica wasn't willing to give up so easily. "Is it true your mother only came back after you found the treasure? Is she after the money?" The question hit the twins like a punch to the stomach. It was the first time anyone had openly suggested that Lisa's return might have financial motives. Emma felt tears start to form in her eyes, while Ethan turned red with anger. "Enough." Mr. Harrison's voice thundered with an authority no one had ever heard before. "Members of the press, you have exactly 1 minute to leave my property, or I will call the police for trespassing." That night, during dinner, a heavy silence hung over the table. The incident with the reporter had brought to the surface fears and insecurities the twins had been trying to ignore. What if she's right? Ethan finally voiced what they were both thinking. What if Mom only came back for the money? Mr. Harrison put down his utensils and looked seriously at the twins. "I'm going to tell you something I haven't told anyone," he began. "Your mother first came to see me 3 weeks ago, before any news of the treasure went public." Emma and Ethan exchanged surprised looks. "What?" Emma asked. "She came here one night after you had gone to sleep," Mr. Harrison continued. "She was nervous, scared, but determined. She showed me documents from the clinic where she was being treated, reports from her doctors, proof that she had been taking her medication regularly. She wanted me to verify everything before allowing any contact with you." Mr. Harrison's words hung in the air as the twins processed the information. It was a side of the story they hadn't known, showing an effort and concern they hadn't considered. That same night, an unexpected event further shook the foundations of Serenity Vale Inn. Martha hurried into Mr. Harrison's office, where he was meeting with the twins, her face pale with worry. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I just got a call. Lisa, she had a relapse. She's in the hospital." The shock of the news was immediate. Emma instinctively grabbed Ethan's hand as Mr. Harrison stood up from his chair. "What happened?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Apparently, the stress of the past few weeks, combined with the newspaper headlines questioning her motives, it was too much for her, Martha explained. "She hasn't been taking her medication regularly the past few days." It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. Ethan, who was usually the quietest and most reserved of the two, stood up with surprising determination. "We need to go see her," he declared firmly. "She may have abandoned us, but now she's trying to get better. And that reporter, she helped cause this." Emma looked at her brother with a mix of surprise and admiration. It was the first time she had seen him take such a strong stance on anything related to their mother. Mr. Harrison looked at the twins with evident pride. "You're right. I'll get the car." At the hospital, they found Lisa in a simple room in the psychiatric ward. She looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, but her eyes lit up when she saw her children entering the room. "Emma?" Ethan. Her voice was weak but clear. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you. Why did you stop taking the medication?" Emma asked, her voice softer than she intended. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment. "Those headlines, people saying I only came back for the money? I started to think maybe they were right, that maybe I didn't deserve a second chance." "That's nonsense," Ethan declared surprisingly. "You're trying to get better. That's what matters." Ethan's words seemed to touch something deep inside Lisa. Tears started to stream down her face as she looked at her children. No longer the kids she had abandoned, but strong and compassionate young people who were choosing to give her a second chance. It was at that moment that Emma had an idea. Turning to Mr. Harrison, who was watching the scene from the doorway, she asked, "Can we use some of the treasure money to help other people like Mom? People who need treatment but can't afford it?" The suggestion caught everyone by surprise, especially Lisa, who looked at her daughter in astonishment. "Actually," Mr. Harrison replied with a smile, "I think your great-grandfather Theodore would be very proud to see his treasure used this way." Emma's suggestion marked a crucial turning point in their story. The treasure they had found would not just be a source of material wealth, but a tool to make a difference in the lives of others. That night, as they returned to the inn, Emma and Ethan realized they had discovered something far more valuable than gold and jewels. They had found the ability to forgive, to understand, and to transform a story of abandonment into one of redemption and hope. The morning sun filtered through the old stained glass windows of Vale Sereno, casting colorful patterns on the floor of the museum as Emma carefully arranged the historical artifacts. 6 months had passed since the treasure discovery, but each piece still told a story that made her heart race. Her delicate hands adjusted a black and white photograph when something fell from behind the frame, a yellowed envelope, with the words "To the future guardians of Vale Sereno" written in elegant handwriting. Emma's heart raced. "Mr. Harrison," she called, her voice echoing through the historic hallways. "I think I found something important." As she waited, Emma couldn't help but reflect on how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she and Ethan were just two abandoned, lost, and frightened children. Now, they were at the center of something much bigger than themselves. Mr. Harrison arrived quickly, followed by Ethan, who had been helping catalog old documents in another room. Upon seeing the envelope, Mr. Harrison's face paled. "This handwriting?" he whispered, taking the envelope with trembling hands. "It's from my grandfather, Theodore." A heavy silence filled the air as he carefully opened the envelope. The letter inside was perfectly preserved, as if it had been waiting decades for this exact moment. Mr. Harrison began to read, his voice thick with emotion. "To those who find this treasure, if you are reading this letter, it means you have discovered not just the chest, but the true heart of Vale Sereno. What I will reveal now has never been documented anywhere, for reasons you will soon understand. During the darkest years of the Great Depression, while entire families were losing everything they had, I secretly turned parts of this house into a refuge. At night, when the rest of the town slept, we opened our doors to those who had nowhere to go. Shattered families found here not just shelter, but hope. The treasure I kept in the vault was not just a family inheritance. It was a guarantee that this work would continue long after I was gone. Every gold coin, every jewel, was kept with a purpose, to ensure that Vale Sereno remained a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. To the true guardians of this place, I ask that you understand. True wealth is not in gold or jewels, but in the ability to reach out to those in need when all others have turned their backs. With hope for the future, Theodore Maxwell." When Mr. Harrison finished reading, silent tears were streaming down his face. Emma and Ethan were equally moved, recognizing in Theodore Maxwell the same spirit that had saved them when they arrived here. "Do you understand what this means?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Vale Sereno has always been more than just an inn or a hidden treasure. It is a legacy of hope and renewal." At that moment, as if by a sign from fate, the door to the museum opened. It was Lisa carrying a tray with tea and cookies. In the past 3 months since being discharged from the hospital, she had been working at the inn, slowly rebuilding her life and her relationship with her children. Seeing the tears on everyone's faces, Lisa stopped. "What happened?" she asked, concerned. Emma took the letter and began reading it aloud to her mother. As Theodore Maxwell's words filled the room again, Lisa sat slowly, recognizing her own story in the subtext of that letter. "It's as if he's speaking directly to us," she said softly. "When I was at rock bottom, this place, it gave me a second chance." The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Martha entered, accompanied by an unexpected visitor. Jessica Parker, the reporter who had caused so much pain months earlier with her sensationalist accusations. The atmosphere immediately became tense, but there was something different in Jessica's demeanor. She seemed smaller, more humble, almost vulnerable. "Please," she said before anyone could speak, "I came to do something I should have done a long time ago." Jessica took a thick envelope out of her purse. "After what happened here, I started researching the history of Vale Sereno. I found records, interviewed elderly people from the town, and discovered something that changed everything." She opened the envelope, revealing old photographs and yellowed documents. "My grandmother, Margaret Collins, was one of the people who found refuge here during the Depression. She was only 8 years old when her family lost everything. Theodore Maxwell not only took them in but helped my grandfather find work, helped him start over. Jessica's hands trembled as she showed a black and white photograph of a little girl smiling on the porch of Vale Sereno. If it weren't for this place for Theodore Maxwell, I wouldn't even exist. The silence that followed was broken by the soft sound of Martha's sobs. She had known many of the house's secrets over the years, but never this particular story. "That's why I've come to ask for forgiveness," Jessica continued, looking directly at Emma and Ethan. "When I questioned your mother's motives, when I tried to turn your story into a scandal, I betrayed the true spirit of this place." It was Ethan who answered, his voice surprisingly firm. "Maybe you were meant to discover this. Maybe you need to be part of telling the true story now." Ethan's words triggered something extraordinary. In the days and weeks that followed, Serenity Valley took on a new dimension. Jessica worked tirelessly to document not only its past history, but also its present impact through the Maxwell Harrison Foundation. The foundation, established with part of the treasure's resources, had already helped dozens of people struggling with mental health issues. Lisa became an active voice, sharing her own recovery journey and inspiring others to seek help. One evening, during a special dinner celebrating the first anniversary of the twins' arrival at Serenity Valley, Mr. Harrison stood to make an announcement. The dining room was adorned with fresh flowers, and the candles created a cozy atmosphere that made everyone's eyes sparkle. "Emma, Ethan," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "when you arrived here, I thought I was just helping 2 children in need. I didn't know I was receiving the greatest gift of my life." He paused, looking at the attentive faces around him. Not just the twins and Lisa, but also Martha, Jessica, and several community members who had become an integral part of the Serenity Valley family. Theodore Maxwell built this place with a sacred purpose: to be a refuge for lost souls, a place of renewal and hope. You didn't just discover the treasure, you proved to be the true heirs of this legacy. That's why I've made a decision. When you come of age, Serenity Valley will be yours. The room fell into absolute silence. Emma and Ethan exchanged glances, stunned, while Lisa covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "But why?" Emma asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Mr. Harrison smiled gently. "Because you understood, better than anyone, the true meaning of this place. It's not about the treasure in the vault. It's about the treasure that exists in the heart of every person who finds a chance to begin again here." At that moment, as if fate itself wanted to confirm his words, a young mother who had been helped by the foundation stood up timidly. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, holding her baby in her arms, "but I need to say something. 3 months ago I had lost all hope. Postpartum depression was consuming me and I saw no way out. Serenity Valley didn't just give me treatment. It gave me back my life, my family." One by one, others stood to share their stories. Stories of despair turned into hope, of darkness giving way to light. Serenity Valley had become more than just a place. It was a living testament to the power of compassion and the ever-present possibility of starting over. As the stories flowed, Emma held Ethan's hand under the table. Somehow, the abandonment they had suffered had led them exactly where they needed to be, not just for their own healing, but to help others find their way back home. The dawn brought a special golden light to Serenity Valley that meaningful morning. It was exactly 1 year since the discovery of the treasure, but the true gold that shone wasn't hidden in any vault. It was in the smiles, the tears of joy, and the transformed lives that now filled every corner of the old inn. Emma woke up early as had become her habit. Standing by the window of her room, she watched the therapeutic garden Ethan had created, a tapestry of vibrant colors where red roses, white daisies, and lavender danced with the morning breeze. Her hands absent-mindedly caressed the diary of Theodore Maxwell, which had become her constant companion. "Couldn't sleep either?" Ethan's soft voice came from the door connecting their rooms. Her brother had changed so much over the past year. He was no longer that frightened, insecure boy. His eyes now carried a quiet wisdom that went beyond his 13 years. "I was thinking about everything," Emma replied, sitting on her bed and making room for her brother. "Sometimes it feels like it was yesterday when we woke up alone in that car." The memory, once so painful, now came with a deeper understanding. On the bedside table, a recent photo showed the twins with Lisa, all smiling, truly happy. It was an image that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "You know," Lisa's voice surprised them from the door, "every morning I thank God for this second chance." She entered the room and sat down with the children. Her face, once marked by depression, now radiated a serenity that came from within. But I'm even more grateful for the strength you had. For not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself. Emma felt tears starting to fall. Mom? No, let me finish. Lisa held her children's hands. Today when I look at you, I see more than just my children. I see two extraordinary young people who turned a tragedy into something miraculous. You didn't just save me, you're saving so many others. The sound of movement downstairs indicated that Martha was already preparing the special breakfast for the celebration. The aroma of fresh bread and freshly brewed coffee rose up the stairs, bringing with it memories of the first day they arrived at Serenity Valley. Come on, Lisa called, wiping her own tears. We've got an important day ahead. The kitchen was a flurry of activity. Martha, with flour on her apron and in her gray hair, was overseeing the preparations like a conductor. Mr. Harrison was sitting at the table, reviewing some papers with his usual attention to detail. Ah, there you are, Martha exclaimed as she saw the three of them enter. Emma, dear, can you help me with the cards for the guests? Ethan, the flowers from the garden need to be picked for the arrangements. It was more than just a celebration. It was a moment of recognition for all the lives that had been touched by Serenity Valley in the past year. The guest list included dozens of people who had found hope and healing through the Maxwell Harrison Foundation. Angela, the young mother who had arrived devastated by postpartum depression, was now helping with the decorations, her little daughter in her arms. I'll never forget my first day here, she said, adjusting a flower arrangement. I could barely look anyone in the eye. Today, I help other mothers find their way back to the light. Robert, a former executive who had lost everything to alcoholism, was now coordinating the Foundation's professional reintegration program. Serenity Valley taught me that our greatest falls can become our greatest strength, he shared, hanging colorful banners. Jessica Parker arrived early, carrying the first copies of her book about the history of Serenity Valley. Its pages told not only the story of the treasure discovered by the twins, but also the hundreds of little miracles that took place daily in that special place. You know, you've transformed my life too, she said to the twins, handing them the first signed copies. You taught me the true meaning of journalism. It's not about sensationalism, it's about telling stories that can change lives. As the morning wore on, more and more people began to arrive. The backyard garden had been transformed into a celebration space, with tables scattered among the flowers and delicate lights hanging between the trees. Mr. Harrison gathered everyone for a special moment. A large bronze plaque was about to be revealed at the entrance to the inn. But before that, he had something important to say. A year ago, he began, his voice heavy with emotion, two extraordinary young people arrived at Serenity Valley under tragic circumstances. At that moment, none of us could have imagined how that day would change all of our lives. He paused, looking at Emma and Ethan with paternal pride. Theodore Maxwell, my grandfather, built this place with a sacred purpose, to be a refuge for lost souls. But it was Emma and Ethan who reminded us of the true meaning of this legacy. Mr. Harrison made a gesture and the plaque was uncovered. Serenity Valley, where lost hearts find their way back home. In memory of Theodore Maxwell, and in honor of Emma and Ethan, who reminded us that the true treasure lies in the ability to transform pain into hope. Tears were flowing freely now, not just on the faces of the twins and their mother, but of everyone present. Each person there had been touched in some way by the magic of Serenity Valley. The celebration continued into the afternoon, with stories being shared, laughter echoing through the gardens, and a palpable sense of gratitude in the air. In a quiet moment, Emma found Ethan sitting on the porch swing watching the scene. Do you think this is what Theodore wanted? He asked softly. Emma smiled, thinking of the diary she had read so many times. I think this is exactly what he wanted. He knew that the true treasure wasn't in the vault. It was in the ability to make a difference in people's lives. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, the residents of Serenity Valley gathered for one last photo. It was an image that perfectly captured the essence of the place. Not just an inn or a foundation, but a family in the truest sense of the word. Lisa hugged her children, Mr. Harrison smiled with paternal pride, Martha wiped away tears of joy, and dozens of happy faces completed the scene. It was a photo that told a story of redemption, second chances, and the transformative power of love and compassion. Serenity Valley would continue its mission, now with a new generation of guardians. Emma and Ethan had learned that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as losses, and that every sad ending has the potential to be the beginning of something extraordinary. And so, the story of the Treasure Twins would continue to inspire and transform lives, reminding all those who found refuge within its walls that the true miracle lies not in what we find, but in what we become along the way. And so, we come to the end of this emotional journey of Emma and Ethan. A story that reminds us that sometimes the greatest treasures in life are hidden in the toughest moments. And have you ever lived through an experience of overcoming that transformed your life? Share it with us in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the Life Stories channel. Every like, every subscription helps us keep sharing powerful stories like this one, which remind us of the strength of love, family, and the human ability to overcome adversity. Also, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming emotional stories. We thank you for sharing these moments with us. Until the next story where another extraordinary journey awaits us.